On October 12, 2010, Thomas Green's life in Portland, Oregon. As a sales manager at a Ford dealership, Green had maintained a steady, if unremarkable, career for the past 8 years. At 34, he lived in a modest 2-story house in an affluent residential neighborhood with his wife Melissa, a part-time yoga instructor at a local studio. The morning began with a call from a prestigious law firm, informing Green of his uncle William Harrison's death in Seattle. Harrison, a successful real estate developer, had unexpectedly named Thomas as his sole heir, leaving him an estate valued at $12 million. The inheritance included liquid assets, property holdings, and investment portfolios. Harrison's decision to bypass his immediate family in favor of his nephew came as a surprise to everyone, including Thomas. That same evening, while setting up his new smartphone, a purchase he'd made to handle the upcoming estate matters, Thomas discovered his wife's ongoing affair. The device automatically synced with their shared home computer, revealing dozens of intimate messages between Melissa Green and Ryan Kelly, a 29-year-old plumber from the southeastern part of Portland. The correspondence dated back to July 2010, detailing their regular meetings at a motel on Portland's outskirts, carefully scheduled during Thomas's extended working hours at the dealership. The messages painted a clear picture of the affair's intensity. Kelly, who had initially done maintenance work at their home, had developed a relationship with Melissa during Thomas's frequent evening shifts. The couple met 3 times a week at the motel, with Melissa often expressing dissatisfaction with her boring married life and Thomas's modest income. However, the dynamics shifted dramatically when Thomas received the inheritance news. Cell phone records would later show that Melissa made a call to Kelly at 2:47 p.m., shortly after Thomas informed her about the inheritance. The call lasted less than 2 minutes. By that evening, Melissa had deleted her private email account and begun removing all traces of her correspondence with Kelly. Over the next week, Melissa's behavior underwent a remarkable transformation. She started preparing elaborate home-cooked meals, something she hadn't done in months. She rearranged her yoga teaching schedule to spend more evenings at home and began talking about future plans with Thomas, including a possible vacation to Europe, their first in 5 years of marriage. Security footage from the motel would later confirm that Melissa's last visit there was on October 11th, the day before the inheritance notification. The motel's register showed regular check-ins under a false name twice a week between July and October, always during Thomas's working hours of 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. By October 20th, Melissa had completely ceased communication with Kelly, as verified by subsequent phone records. She focused entirely on supporting Thomas through the inheritance process, accompanying him to meetings with financial advisors and attorneys. She even suggested they renew their wedding vows, a stark contrast to her previous disinterest in their marriage. Thomas, still processing both the inheritance and the discovery of infidelity, maintained detailed records of these events in his personal journal, documentation that would prove crucial in future legal proceedings. He noted Melissa's sudden change in behavior, but chose not to confront her immediately, instead focusing on managing his uncle's estate and contemplating his next steps regarding his marriage. The month concluded with Thomas taking a leave of absence from the dealership to handle the inheritance matters, while Melissa began researching divorce laws in the state of Oregon. On November 15, 2010, Melissa Green initiated divorce proceedings against Thomas Green, a month after his inheritance of $12 million. Her timing was strategically planned to align with Oregon state laws, which typically consider inheritances received during marriage as shared marital property. This legal interpretation would potentially entitle her to half of Thomas's newly acquired wealth. Melissa secured the services of Richard Morgan, a divorce attorney notorious in Portland's legal circles for his aggressive litigation tactics and unprecedented success in high-asset divorce cases. Morgan had earned a reputation for securing favorable settlements through a combination of aggressive discovery processes and strategic media manipulation. His retainer fee of $50,000 was paid in cash, money that Melissa had systematically withdrawn from their joint account over the previous 3 weeks. Investigation would later reveal that Melissa had methodically prepared for this moment. In the weeks following Thomas's inheritance notification, she had photographed and copied every relevant document: the inheritance paperwork, bank statements, property deeds, and investment portfolio details. She had also hired a private investigator to compile a detailed report on Thomas's past financial activities. This investigation uncovered Thomas's unreported income from various side jobs between 2007 and 2009, when he had supplemented his car dealership salary by doing weekend maintenance work and helping at construction sites. The total undeclared income amounted to approximately $45,000 over 3 years. Melissa used this information as leverage, threatening to report Thomas to tax authorities unless he agreed to her settlement terms. Morgan's legal strategy was multifaceted. First, he filed motions to freeze Thomas's assets, including the inherited properties and investment accounts. Second, he demanded full financial disclosure dating back 7 years, significantly beyond the standard 3-year look-back period. The court documents painted Thomas as a calculating individual who had historically concealed assets and income. Parallel to the legal proceedings, Melissa openly resumed her relationship with Ryan Kelly. The couple was seen together at various Portland establishments, no longer attempting to hide their affair. Kelly, who had initially distanced himself after the inheritance news, returned to Melissa's life with renewed interest. Witnesses would later testify to seeing them shopping for luxury items and discussing future plans involving the anticipated divorce settlement. Morgan's office began preparing documentation, arguing that the inheritance should be considered marital property, because Thomas had received it while still married. They cited previous Oregon cases where inheritances were split during divorce proceedings, particularly when one spouse had contributed significantly to the marriage's longevity. Melissa claimed she had supported Thomas through difficult times, including the early years of his career when he was struggling to establish himself at the dealership. The legal team also prepared arguments about Melissa's sacrifices during the marriage, including limiting her yoga teaching career to support Thomas's work schedule. They calculated her potential lost earnings and career development opportunities, adding these figures to their settlement demands. Thomas found himself increasingly cornered. His own attorney advised that fighting the divorce could result in a lengthy, expensive legal battle with uncertain outcomes, particularly given the tax evasion allegations. The situation was further complicated by Melissa's careful documentation of their marital history, which she had been collecting since discovering Thomas's inheritance. By early December, the pressure on Thomas intensified. Melissa's legal team submitted a settlement proposal demanding 65% of the inheritance, citing her knowledge of the tax evasion as leverage. The document outlined a comprehensive division of assets, including the inherited properties, investment portfolios, and future earnings from the estate's ongoing business ventures. The psychological toll on Thomas became evident to his colleagues and family. He stopped attending work, withdrew from social interactions, and spent increasing amounts of time alone in their house's basement wine room. December 15, 2010. Thomas, mentally exhausted from the ongoing divorce proceedings, left a meeting with his attorney early that afternoon. The meeting had focused on Melissa's increasingly aggressive settlement demands and the potential consequences of her tax evasion threats. Thomas arrived home at approximately 6:15 p.m., 2 hours earlier than his usual return time. Neighbors would later report hearing his car pull into the driveway at this unusual hour. Upon entering his house, Thomas heard noises from the master bedroom on the second floor. As he climbed the stairs, the sounds became unmistakable. Opening the bedroom door, Thomas discovered Melissa and Ryan Kelly in an intimate situation on the bed he had shared with his wife for 5 years. The ensuing confrontation, pieced together from later confessions and forensic evidence, quickly escalated into a heated argument. Several neighbors reported hearing raised voices starting around 6:20 p.m. Melissa, rather than showing any remorse, launched into a verbal assault on Thomas's character. According to Thomas's subsequent police confession, she called him a pathetic excuse for a man who had never amounted to anything before his inheritance. She detailed how she had endured years of living a middle-class lifestyle while knowing she deserved better. During the confrontation, Melissa revealed that Kelly wasn't her only extramarital partner. She confessed to multiple affairs over the previous 2 years, including encounters with a golf instructor, a regular client from her yoga studio, and even one of Thomas's former co-workers from the dealership. Each revelation was delivered with calculated cruelty, designed to maximize Thomas's humiliation. Ryan Kelly, appearing uncomfortable with the escalating situation, hastily dressed and left the house at approximately 6:35 p.m. Surveillance footage from a neighboring house would later confirm his departure time, showing him quickly walking to his service van parked a block away. This would be the last time Kelly saw either of them alive. Left alone with Thomas, Melissa became even more confrontational. She detailed her plans for the inheritance money, describing luxury vacations with Kelly, a new house in the expensive part of Portland, and how she would ensure Thomas's complete financial ruin through the divorce proceedings. According to Thomas's later testimony, she laughed while explaining how she would use his own money to destroy him. The breaking point came when Melissa turned her attention to Thomas's recently deceased Uncle William. She mocked the man's decision to leave his fortune to Thomas, suggesting that the old man must have been senile or stupid to trust his nephew with the money. She revealed that she had already discussed with her attorney how to challenge the will itself if the divorce settlement proved insufficient. Neighbors reported hearing the argument reach its peak intensity around 6:45 p.m. One neighbor, walking her dog at the time, heard Melissa's voice clearly through an open window, shouting about wasted years and finally getting what she deserved. The same neighbor noted that the house fell eerily quiet approximately 5 minutes later. According to Thomas's confession, when Melissa began laughing about his uncle's death and suggesting the man had died just in time to provide her with a better life with her lover, something in him snapped. The psychological pressure of the preceding months, the discovery of infidelity, the inheritance, the divorce proceedings, the blackmail attempts, and now the desecration of his uncle's memory, culminated in that moment. The medical examiner's report would later confirm that the fatal confrontation occurred between 6:45 and 6:50 p.m. At 6:48 p.m. on December 15, 2010, in a moment of uncontrolled rage, Thomas Green pushed his wife Melissa. The force of the push sent her backward, and her head struck the corner of their bedroom's marble fireplace mantel with devastating impact. The medical examiner would later determine that the point of impact caused immediate fatal trauma, resulting in instantaneous death. Drawing on his experience as a construction worker during his college summers between 1995 and 1998, Thomas formulated a plan. He knew the layout of their 1920s-era house intimately, including the basement's peculiarities. Behind the wine room, installed by previous owners, lay an unused space created by an old renovation project. Over the next 3 days, Thomas executed a methodical plan to conceal his crime. He began by carefully cleaning the crime scene, using his knowledge of construction materials to remove and replace the blood-stained section of carpet. The marble fireplace was meticulously cleaned with professional-grade solutions purchased from different stores across Portland to avoid suspicion. In the basement, Thomas worked through the nights creating a concealed chamber. The space was thoroughly sealed to prevent any odors from escaping. The work was executed with remarkable precision, a fact that investigators would later cite as evidence of premeditation, despite Thomas's claims of panic-driven actions. Simultaneously, Thomas orchestrated an elaborate cover story for Melissa's disappearance. He used her credit cards to purchase airline tickets to various European destinations, creating a trail suggesting she had fled the country. The first ticket was to London, followed by connections to Paris and Rome. Each transaction was carefully timed to appear as if Melissa was making impulsive travel decisions. Using Melissa's laptop, Thomas sent emails to her family members and friends. The messages, composed to match her writing style, spoke of needing time away to reflect on her life. He drew from their recent arguments to make the emails convincing, incorporating details about her dissatisfaction with their marriage and her desire for a fresh start. He packed some of Melissa's favorite clothes and personal items, making it appear she had left in a hurry. He disposed of these items across different locations in Portland and neighboring cities, creating a false trail of her supposed departure. The bank records show that Thomas withdrew moderate amounts of cash from various ATMs using Melissa's card, carefully staying under the daily withdrawal limits to avoid triggering any alerts. These transactions created a pattern suggesting Melissa was preparing for her supposed escape. On December 18th, after completing the concealment, Thomas reported Melissa's disappearance to the police. He presented himself as a concerned husband, showing officers the emails and travel bookings. His performance was convincing. He appeared as a man genuinely worried about his wife's mental state and impulsive actions during their divorce proceedings. The initial police investigation focused on the European angle, wasting precious time tracking non-existent movements across multiple countries. Thomas's careful planning had created a plausible scenario of a woman abandoning her marriage and fleeing abroad, a narrative that seemed particularly credible given the ongoing bitter divorce proceedings and her documented affair. For the next decade, the basement of the Green residence would hold its dark secret, while Thomas lived upstairs, maintaining the fiction of a husband abandoned by his wife during contentious divorce proceedings. The truth would remain hidden until nature itself would conspire to reveal what lay behind the basement wall. February 2020 brought unprecedented rainfall to Portland, Oregon. Weather records indicated the highest precipitation levels in 5 decades, leading to widespread flooding across residential areas. The historic neighborhood where Thomas Green resided was particularly affected due to its aging infrastructure and proximity to water tables. On February 24th, Thomas discovered significant water infiltration in his basement, particularly around the wine room area. The situation forced him to contact his insurance company, which dispatched structural engineer Stephen Morrison to assess the damage on February 26th. Morrison arrived equipped with modern ground-penetrating radar and thermal imaging technology, standard tools for detecting structural issues that would ultimately unravel a decade-old crime. During his inspection, Morrison's scanning equipment revealed an anomaly: a concealed space behind the wine room wall, approximately 6 feet deep and 8 feet wide. This space didn't appear on any original blueprints of the house, dating back to its 1920s construction. More critically, the scans showed that this area had become a major point of water infiltration, threatening the house's structural integrity. Morrison's report, filed on March 2nd, highlighted the urgent need for foundation repairs. The insurance company approved emergency structural work, scheduled to begin March 17th. Thomas, trapped by circumstances, could neither object nor delay the repairs without raising suspicion. At 9:15 a.m. on March 17th, the construction crew began removing the compromised wall section. At 10:47 a.m., their work revealed human remains, carefully concealed within the hidden chamber. Work halted immediately, and law enforcement was notified. By 11:30 a.m., Detective Alex Foster and his forensic team had secured the scene. The remains were positively identified as Melissa Green through dental records and DNA testing. The forensic examination revealed that her body had been carefully preserved by the cool, dry conditions of the sealed chamber, providing crucial evidence about her death. The medical examiner determined that blunt force trauma to the back of the head had caused instant death. A thorough search of the house yielded critical evidence. Investigators discovered Melissa's diary hidden in a ventilation shaft, documenting her plans to exploit the inheritance through divorce proceedings. The diary's final entry, dated December 15, 2010, mentioned her intention to confront Thomas about the divorce settlement. In Thomas's personal safe, investigators found Melissa's original passport, jewelry, and personal documents, items that should have been with her if she had truly fled to Europe. They also uncovered drafts of correspondence between Melissa and her divorce attorney, outlining strategies to maximize her settlement claims. The forensic investigation of the concealment site revealed professional-grade construction techniques. The chamber had been carefully waterproofed and ventilated, demonstrating knowledge of construction principles that aligned with Thomas's college-era work experience. This meticulous construction would later become a crucial point in the prosecution's case. On March 20th, after 3 days of intensive interrogation, Thomas Green confessed. His detailed admission, recorded over 6 hours, chronicled the events of December 15, 2010. He described the argument, the fatal push, and the subsequent days spent concealing the crime. The confession included details that only the perpetrator could have known, removing any doubt about his guilt. Technical experts examining the concealment site noted several sophisticated construction elements: proper moisture barriers, reinforced walls, and carefully matched building materials. These details suggested premeditation rather than panic-driven concealment, contradicting Thomas's claims of acting in the heat of the moment. The case attracted national media attention, with journalists dubbing it the inheritance murder. The trial of Thomas Green began on September 7, 2020, in the Portland courthouse, drawing unprecedented media attention. District Attorney David Stone opened the proceedings with a powerful statement, portraying the defendant as a calculating murderer who had methodically concealed his crime for a decade. Stone emphasized the sophisticated construction of the concealment site, arguing that its complexity indicated premeditation rather than panic. Defense attorney Brian Walsh countered with a different narrative, presenting Thomas as a devastated husband who had acted in a moment of extreme emotional distress. Walsh's opening statement detailed the psychological torment Thomas had endured upon discovering his wife's infidelity and her subsequent attempts to exploit his inheritance. The trial revealed previously unknown details about Melissa's past relationships. 3 former lovers testified, painting a portrait of a manipulative woman who had systematically exploited men for financial gain. A former yoga student described how Melissa had convinced him to invest in non-existent business ventures. Another witness, a local businessman, testified about lending her substantial sums of money that were never repaid. Forensic experts presented detailed analyses of the basement concealment site. While the prosecution used the construction's sophistication to argue premeditation, the defense maintained that Thomas's prior construction experience explained the technical proficiency, even in a panic-driven state. The discovery of Melissa's diary proved pivotal. The document, read aloud in court, revealed elaborate schemes to maximize her divorce settlement. Entries detailed her relationships with multiple men, her plans to exploit Thomas's undeclared income for leverage, and her strategic timing of the divorce filing to capitalize on the inheritance. Emma Hartley, Melissa's mother, delivered an emotional victim impact statement on September 15. She described her decade-long anguish over her daughter's disappearance and demanded maximum punishment. However, her testimony's impact diminished significantly when the defense presented diary entries in which Melissa mocked her mother's emotional nature and detailed plans to manipulate her for financial support. On September 21, Thomas Green took the stand. In his testimony, he expressed profound remorse for his actions. He described living with overwhelming guilt for 10 years, explaining how each day in his house had been a reminder of his crime. His voice trembled as he recounted the fatal argument, maintaining that he had never intended to kill Melissa. After 7 days of deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. They found Thomas Green guilty of manslaughter rather than first-degree murder, accepting the defense's argument that the killing occurred in the heat of passion, without premeditation. The construction of the concealment site, while methodical, was deemed a panic-driven attempt to hide the unplanned crime. Judge Patrick O'Neill delivered the sentence on October 1, 2020. Citing the unusual circumstances of the case, he sentenced Thomas to 15 years in prison with possibility of parole after 8 years. The judge ordered the entire inheritance from William Harrison to be transferred to charitable organizations, specifically directing funds to domestic violence prevention programs. Before being taken into custody, Thomas gave a final interview to local media. His parting words resonated deeply. "Money brought me nothing but a ruined life. If I could go back in time, I would refuse every cent of that cursed inheritance." This statement, published in newspapers nationwide, became a somber reminder of how wealth can catalyze tragedy. Thomas Green began serving his sentence at the state penitentiary on October 5, 2020.